We've all been there. Someone says something rude, dismissive, or thoughtless, and before we even realize it, we're upset. Our mood shifts, our body tenses, and suddenly we're carrying around emotions that weren't even ours to begin with. But here's the truth. We don't have to absorb other people's negativity. Mastering emotional boundaries means recognizing that while we can't control how others behave, we absolutely can control how we respond. It's about reclaiming our emotional space and deciding who and what gets to affect us. At the core of emotional boundaries is self-awareness. When we don't recognize our emotional limits, we become like sponges, soaking up the stress, anger, or negativity of those around us. But emotional maturity means understanding that we are separate from others. Their words, their moods, and their actions belong to them, not us. When someone lashes out, it's often more about their own struggles than anything we did. Learning to pause and ask, is this mine to carry? Can be a game changer. One of the biggest mistakes we make is assuming that people's actions are a direct reflection of how they feel about us. The reality is, most people are operating from their own experiences, wounds, and fears. When a coworker snaps at you, it's probably not because they dislike you. It could be because they're overwhelmed, sleep deprived, or dealing with something you know nothing about. Emotional boundaries help us create a filter, allowing us to observe behavior without internalizing it. So how do we set these boundaries? It starts with giving ourselves permission to protect our peace. This means recognizing when someone's energy is pulling us in and making a conscious decision not to engage in an emotional tug of war. Instead of reacting impulsively, we can practice emotional detachment, not in a cold or dismissive way, but in a way that acknowledges, I see what's happening, but I don't have to take it on. This might look like walking away from unnecessary conflict, taking a deep breath before responding, or simply reminding ourselves this is not about me. It's also important to surround ourselves with people who respect our boundaries. When we model emotional stability and self-respect, we naturally attract relationships that honor those values. We teach people how to treat us by the way we respond. If we consistently allow ourselves to be emotionally affected by others, we give them silent permission to keep pulling us into their storms. But when we stand firm, people learn that our emotions are not up for manipulation. At the end of the day, emotional boundaries are an act of self-care. They free us from the exhausting cycle of reacting to every little thing that comes our way. Instead of feeling drained by the words and actions of others, we learn to stay grounded in our own peace. And when we do that, we don't just protect ourselves, we create space for healthier, more authentic connections with the people around us. Because when we stop absorbing what isn't ours to carry, we finally have room to fully embrace what is. How many times have we replayed a conversation in our minds, dissecting every word, every pause, and every tone? Maybe someone was short with us at work, a friend didn't return our text, or a stranger gave us a dismissive look. Instinctively, we take it personally, wondering what we did wrong, if we said something off, or if we're being judged. But what if I told you that most of the time, other people's actions have absolutely nothing to do with us? The power of perspective is recognizing that people act from their own internal world, one filled with their own struggles, insecurities, and emotions. Learning to see through this lens changes everything. One of the biggest reasons we take things personally is because, by default, we view the world through our own experiences. We assume that when someone reacts a certain way, it must be about us. But in reality, people bring their own baggage into every interaction. That coworker who seemed irritated might be dealing with a personal crisis. That friend who canceled plans last minute may be struggling with anxiety. That driver who cut you off in traffic might be rushing to the hospital. When we shift from why are they doing this to me to what might they be going through, we create space for understanding rather than resentment. This perspective is especially powerful when dealing with criticism. We've all encountered people who are quick to judge, dismiss, or even attack us verbally. It's easy to let those words sting, but when we recognize that their reaction is a reflection of their own fears, beliefs, or past wounds, it loses its grip on us. A boss who constantly criticizes might have grown up in an environment where perfection was demanded. A family member who undermines your choices may be projecting their own regrets onto you. Their words say more about them than they do about you. Another way to reframe how we interpret people's actions is to ask ourselves, if I weren't here, would this still be happening? The answer is almost always yes. People don't wake up thinking about how they can ruin our day. They're too busy managing their own. When someone lashes out, ignores us, or acts distant, it's rarely a calculated move against us. It's usually a result of whatever is happening in their own mind and heart. Realizing this allows us to detach emotionally instead of spiraling into self-doubt or frustration. This shift in perspective isn't about excusing bad behavior. It's about freeing ourselves from unnecessary suffering. It doesn't mean we accept disrespect or tolerate unhealthy relationships, but it does mean we stop wasting energy personalizing things that aren't about us. We learn to pause before reacting, to ask ourselves, is this really about me? More often than not, the answer is no. And in that pause, we reclaim our power. We stop letting the moods, opinions, and behaviors of others dictate how we feel about ourselves. At the heart of it all, the power of perspective is about choosing peace over emotional chaos. When we stop taking things personally, we move through life with a lighter heart. We become less reactive, more compassionate, and infinitely more resilient. And that's the kind of strength that allows us to navigate relationships, challenges, and even criticism with grace. Because the moment we realize that most of what people do has nothing to do with us, we finally step into a freedom that is ours to keep. If there's one voice we hear the most in our lifetime, it's our own. That inner dialogue running through our mind, guiding us, questioning us, sometimes even tearing us down, has more power than we realize. And for many of us, that voice isn't always kind. We hold ourselves to impossible standards, criticize our every misstep, and expect perfection in ways we would never demand from others. But here's the truth. Resilience isn't built by pushing ourselves to the brink. It's built by offering ourselves grace. Self-compassion is not weakness. It is the quiet, steady force that allows us to rise again and again, no matter how many times we stumble. At its core, self-compassion means treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we so readily offer to others. Think about how you would comfort a close friend who made a mistake. You wouldn't berate them, call them names, or tell them they're not good enough. You'd remind them that they're human, that mistakes happen, and that this moment does not define them. So why is it that when we fall short, we meet ourselves with harshness instead of grace? The way we speak to ourselves matters, and shifting from self-judgment to self-compassion can transform the way we handle life's challenges. One of the biggest myths about self-compassion is that it makes us weak or complacent, that if we go easy on ourselves, we won't strive for more. But research shows the opposite is true. When we approach ourselves with kindness, we build resilience. We learn from failure instead of being paralyzed by it. We become more willing to take risks because we know we have our own back, no matter the outcome. It's not self-pity or an excuse to avoid growth. It's the foundation that allows us to grow in a way that is sustainable and empowering. A key part of self-compassion is recognizing our shared humanity. No one is perfect, no one has it all figured out, and no one gets through life without making mistakes. Yet, we often hold ourselves to an unrealistic standard, as if we should somehow be exempt from struggle. When we remember that imperfection is part of the human experience, we stop seeing failure as proof that we're not good enough. Instead, we see it as proof that we're learning, evolving, and showing up for life in the best way we know how. Self-compassion also teaches us to slow down and care for ourselves in meaningful ways. It's easy to get caught in the cycle of constantly proving our worth, working harder, saying yes when we're exhausted, pushing through burnout as if rest is a luxury instead of a necessity. But being kind to ourselves means listening to what we truly need. It means setting boundaries, allowing ourselves to rest, and recognizing that we are worthy even when we're not producing or achieving. The more we practice self-compassion, the stronger and more resilient we become, not because we never fall, but because we trust ourselves to get back up with gentleness instead of self-punishment. At the end of the day, self-compassion is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves. It's the difference between a life driven by fear and one rooted in courage. It's what allows us to move forward without the constant weight of shame and self-criticism holding us back. And when we embrace it fully, we become unstoppable, not because we're perfect, but because we've learned to stand in our imperfections with strength, grace, and a heart full of kindness for ourselves. Have you ever found yourself in a heated conversation, saying something you later regretted, or maybe someone's words stung, and before you knew it, you fired back without thinking? That's the difference between reacting and responding. A reaction is immediate, often driven by emotion and sometimes regrettable. A response, on the other hand, is intentional, thoughtful, and grounded. Mastering the ability to pause before engaging is one of the most powerful tools we can develop, not just for healthier relationships, but for our own emotional well-being. At its core, reacting is a survival instinct. Our brains are wired to protect us, and when we perceive a threat, whether it's criticism, disrespect, or even an uncomfortable situation, our fight or flight response kicks in. We might lash out, shut down, or say something impulsively, all in an effort to defend ourselves. The problem is reacting often leads to more damage than protection. It can escalate conflicts, strain relationships, and leave us feeling drained. But when we pause and give ourselves space to process, we step out of survival mode and into a place of clarity. Pausing before we respond doesn't mean ignoring our emotions. In fact, it means honoring them. It's about recognizing what we're feeling without letting those emotions take the driver's seat. When someone says something that upsets us, instead of immediately firing back, we can take a deep breath and ask ourselves, what am I really feeling? Why is this triggering me? How do I want to show up in this moment? That short moment of reflection can be the difference between fueling conflict and fostering understanding. One of the most effective ways to practice responding instead of reacting is through mindfulness. Being mindful means being present in the moment, fully aware of our thoughts and emotions without letting them control us. When we cultivate mindfulness, we learn to observe our feelings rather than be consumed by them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means allowing them to pass through us without dictating our behavior. Imagine a difficult conversation where you normally would have snapped. Instead, you take a pause, acknowledge your frustration, and then choose your words intentionally. That small shift creates a ripple effect in every interaction we have. This practice isn't just about managing conflict, it's about reclaiming our power. When we react impulsively, we're giving control to the situation or the other person. But when we respond with intention, we take that power back. We get to decide how we want to engage, what energy we want to bring, and what kind of person we want to be in that moment. It's not about being passive or suppressing our feelings. It's about making sure our actions align with who we truly are. At the end of the day, learning to pause before we engage is an act of self-respect. It allows us to navigate life with more peace, clarity, and emotional intelligence. Instead of being pulled into unnecessary drama or conflict, we move through challenges with grace. And the best part, the more we practice responding instead of reacting, the more natural it becomes. We train ourselves to step back, reflect, and choose our words and actions wisely. And that, more than anything, is a skill that we've all been there. Wishing someone would just behave differently, say the right words, make the right choices, or finally see things from our perspective. We tell ourselves that if only they would change, things would be easier. But the hard truth is, we have no control over how others act, think, or feel. The more we try to control them, the more frustrated, anxious, and exhausted we become. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about gaining freedom. It's about recognizing that true peace comes when we release our grip on things we were never meant to hold on to in the first place. One of the biggest traps we fall into is believing that if we just explain ourselves better, argue more convincingly, or show enough love, we can make someone change. But people don't change because we want them to, they change when they choose to. No amount of pressure, worry, or persuasion can force someone to see things our way. And when we hold onto the illusion that we can control others, we set ourselves up for disappointment. The more we cling to expectations about how others should behave, the more we suffer when they don't meet them. Letting go means accepting people as they are, not as we wish they would be. This doesn't mean we tolerate disrespect or stay in unhealthy situations. It means we stop trying to manage the emotions, decisions, and behaviors of others. We allow people the dignity of their own journey, even if it looks different from what we imagined. Maybe a loved one isn't making the choices we'd hoped for. Maybe a friend isn't showing up in the way we need. Instead of trying to fix or force them into change, we take a step back and recognize this is their path, not mine. That shift alone is liberating. A big part of this process is learning to separate our peace from other people's actions. We don't have to wait for someone to apologize before we move on. We don't have to wait for someone to behave differently before we find joy. When we tie our emotional well-being to how others act, we give them too much power over us. But when we release that need for control, we reclaim our own happiness. We realize that peace isn't found in getting others to act right. It's found in learning to be okay no matter how they act. Letting go is also an act of self-trust. It means believing that no matter what happens, we can handle it. When we try to control others, it often comes from a place of fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of uncertainty, fear of things not going the way we planned. But when we trust ourselves, we don't need to micromanage every situation. We understand that we can navigate whatever comes our way, even if it's not what we expected. We shift from trying to control everything outside of us to building a strong foundation within us. At the heart of it all, letting go is about finding freedom. Freedom from the stress of managing others, freedom from the weight of unmet expectations, and freedom to focus on what we can control, our own thoughts, actions, and emotions. It's a daily practice, but every time we choose to release control, we create more space for peace. And in that space, we find the kind of freedom that no one else can take away from us.